My name is Evelyn, and for the past 10 years, I have been married to a wonderful man, Michael. We have built a beautiful home together, filled with love, laughter, and stability. Michael is a hard-working businessman, always traveling to secure deals and expand his company. I, on the other hand, am a housewife. At 35, I still looked beautiful, at least, that's what I told myself every morning in the mirror. My curves were intact, my skin was glowing, thanks to my expensive skincare routine and an unreasonable amount of water, and my charm? Oh, it was undeniable. I wasn't the type of woman to let age slow me down. While some of my friends had resigned themselves to wearing oversized house dresses and complaining about joint pains, I still took care of myself. My hair was always done, my nails always polished, and my waist. Well, let's just say I could still fit into the jeans I wore at 25, on a good day, if I held my breath long enough. I knew men still found me attractive. The occasional lingering stares from strangers, the polite but slightly too friendly greetings from my husband's business associates, and even the shopkeeper who always forgot to charge me for an extra bottle of soda, these were the little signs that told me I hadn't lost my spark. But I never entertained any of them. No matter how much attention I received, I remained faithful to my husband. I wore my wedding ring with pride and never allowed myself to even consider another man. That is, until I made the biggest mistake of my life. And it all started with one innocent moment, one careless glance that turned into something much, much worse. It all started when we hired a new house help, David. He was 20, young, strong, and full of life. At first, I saw him as just another worker in our home, someone to clean, cook, and assist with household chores. He was polite, hardworking, and always had a big smile on his face. I even thought of him as a little brother, well, at least for the first few weeks. David moved around the house effortlessly, sweeping, mopping, and carrying heavy loads with ease. My husband, Michael, was impressed. Finally, we have someone reliable, he had said, patting David on the back. At that time, I couldn't have agreed more. David was an excellent worker. He didn't complain, didn't slack off, and was always willing to go the extra mile. He even whistled while washing dishes, which, I admit, was quite annoying but also oddly charming. For a long time, I barely paid attention to him. To me, he was just the help until one evening when everything changed. I had just finished preparing dinner and was heading toward the backyard when I heard the sound of running water. Out of pure curiosity, I peeked through the slightly open door. And there he was. David was showering under the open-air tap, his back turned toward me. Water cascaded down his muscular back, highlighting every toned muscle. His shoulders were broad, his arms well-defined, and his waist tapered perfectly. My eyes widened. I had never noticed just how built he was. Then, as if he had sensed my presence, he turned slightly to the side, giving me an unintentional, or maybe very intentional, show. My breath hitched. For a second, I forgot I was a respectable married woman. And then it happened, David caught me staring. I panicked. My heart leaped into my throat. I tried to look away, but my body betrayed me. Instead of rushing off, I stood frozen like a child caught stealing from the cookie jar. David smirked. Not just any smirk, the kind that made it clear he knew exactly what had just happened. Instead of covering himself in shock or embarrassment, like a normal person, he casually ran his fingers through his wet hair and stretched, flexing every muscle in his arms as if he had just stepped onto a runway. Was he doing this on purpose? Was this some sort of hidden camera prank? My mind screamed at me to leave, but my feet refused to listen. Instead, I did the most embarrassing thing possible. I tripped over my own slippers and nearly fell face-first into the ground. David chuckled. "You okay, madam?" he asked, clearly enjoying my humiliation. I snapped out of my trance, my face burning. I was just looking for my cat. I blurted out, despite the fact that we didn't even own a cat. David raised an eyebrow, but he didn't press further. I turned and dashed inside, my heart pounding in my ears. From that day on, I could never look at him the same way again. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, my body restless, my mind flooded with thoughts of David. His strong arms, his confident smirk, The way the water had glistened on his skin, it was all I could think about. Guilt gnawed at me, whispering that I was a married woman, that this was wrong. But another voice, one much louder, much more persuasive, told me that it had been so long since I felt this kind of excitement. I stared at the ceiling, biting my lip. Why was I feeling like this? It wasn't like I had done anything. I had just looked. But deep down, I knew looking had already crossed a line. The next morning, I woke up feeling groggy, my emotions still tangled from the night before. Michael got ready for work, kissed me on the forehead, and left as usual. I watched him go, a tight knot forming in my stomach. My husband was a good man. He had never given me a reason to stray. So why did I feel like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, dangerously close to jumping? I told myself to shake it off, to focus on something else. But before I knew it, my feet carried me to the kitchen. David was there, wiping down the counter, his muscles flexing ever so slightly as he moved. He was wearing a simple white t-shirt, but on him, it looked like something out of a fitness magazine. I swallowed hard. He must have sensed me watching because he turned around, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "You like what you saw yesterday?" he asked boldly, his voice deep and teasing. I nearly dropped the glass I had just picked up. My fingers tightened around it, my throat suddenly dry. He was supposed to pretend nothing happened. He was supposed to be oblivious. Instead, he was standing there, looking at me like he already knew all my secrets. I should have shut it down. I should have laughed it off, told him he was being ridiculous. But instead, I found myself smiling. "What makes you think I was watching?" I asked, tilting my head slightly, playing along. David chuckled, taking a step closer. He was close enough now that I could smell his cologne, fresh, masculine, intoxicating. "I saw it in your eyes," he murmured, his gaze never leaving mine. "You want me." My breath hitched. No man had ever spoken to me like this before. Not even my husband. Michael was always sweet, respectful, gentle. But this was different. This was dangerous. I should have walked away. I should have fired him. I should have reminded myself of the vows I had taken. But I didn't. That day marked the beginning of a dangerous affair. At first, it was just flirtation, a stolen glance here, a brush of hands there. But soon, it became more. One evening, when my husband was away on a business trip, I found myself alone with David in the kitchen. The house was quiet, the only sound coming from the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic ticking of the clock. I was wearing a silk nightgown, its smooth fabric clinging to my skin in all the right places. I had told myself it was just for comfort, just another night like any other. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had chosen it on purpose. David stood shirtless, wiping the counter, his muscles flexing with each slow, deliberate movement. The dim kitchen light cast soft shadows over his toned chest and arms, making it impossible to look away. Our eyes met. Neither of us spoke, but the air between us shifted. It was thick with something unspoken, something dangerous. My fingers tightened around the glass of wine I had poured, my heart pounding in my chest. He took a step closer, and I didn't move. My breath hitched as he reached for the towel beside me, his arm grazing mine ever so slightly. The touch was brief, innocent even, but it sent a shiver down my spine. It was electric. Forbidden. Intoxicating. I should have turned away. I should have left the kitchen, locked myself in my room, and reminded myself that this was wrong. But instead, I let the moment pull me in like a tide too strong to resist. That night, I gave in to temptation. For weeks, our affair continued, burning hotter with each stolen moment. What started as an impulsive mistake had evolved into something I couldn't control, a dangerous obsession. The thrill of secrecy had become an addiction. Every time my husband, Michael, left for work or another business trip, David and I found ways to be together. It became a routine, one that felt like a twisted dance, a game of cat and mouse where we were both the hunters and the prey. At first, the rush of it all was intoxicating. The secrecy, the stolen glances, the quiet moments when no one else was around. I convinced myself that it wasn't as bad as it seemed, that it was harmless, just a bit of fun, nothing serious. But with every passing day, that thought became harder and harder to hold on to. David was more than just our house help now. He was my escape, my refuge from the monotony of married life. He made me feel alive in ways I hadn't felt in years. When I was with him, I wasn't just a wife, a mother, or a woman stuck in the routine of daily life. I was a woman desired, needed, wanted. And that made me feel powerful, as though I could do anything. The excitement of our secret meetings grew with each passing day. We became bolder. What started as whispered encounters in hidden corners of the house soon turned into reckless abandon. We would slip away to the garden when Michael was working late, sneaking out while the house was still quiet. I would feel David's hands on me when I least expected it, and I would be too consumed by the heat of the moment to care about the consequences. But it wasn't just the physicality that thrilled me, it was the danger. The risk of being caught, the constant reminder that one wrong move could destroy everything. And yet, every time I thought we were pushing the limits too far, it only made me want him more. We would meet in the mornings when Michael had already left for work, sneaking around the house like we were teenagers sneaking out past curfew. We would lock eyes, and without a word, I'd know what he wanted. And what I wanted too. There was something intoxicating about the stolen moments, the constant tension of being so close to disaster. In the evenings, when Michael had to leave for business trips, we had all the time in the world. I would wear something that I knew would drive David wild, something revealing yet elegant, and he would look at me like I was the only woman in the world. His touch sent shivers down my spine, and with each passing encounter, it felt more like an addiction than a choice. I knew it was dangerous. I knew it was wrong. But every time I told myself I was done, that I would end it, I couldn't. The moments we shared were so electrifying, so completely intoxicating, that it felt impossible to stop. It was a game, a dangerous, reckless game that I convinced myself I was winning. I told myself I was careful, that no one could see through the facade. Michael was busy with his work, distracted by his career, and David was the perfect lover, silent, attentive, and always available when I needed him. I never once stopped to consider what would happen if Michael found out, if the truth ever came to light. I convinced myself that I could manage both lives, that I could have it all, the perfect marriage, the perfect life, and the thrill of forbidden love. But deep down, a part of me knew the truth. I was playing with fire. And sooner or later, I was going to get burned. I felt alive, desired, and reckless. The thrill of secrecy made every touch, every whisper, every glance feel like something out of a forbidden romance novel. I was no longer just a wife, I was a woman rediscovering passion, reliving a youthful recklessness I thought I had buried long ago. But I was blind. Blinded by the excitement, by the rush of forbidden thrills, by the intoxicating feeling of being desired in a way I hadn't felt in years. I had convinced myself that I was in control, that I could balance everything without anyone noticing, without consequences. I was so caught up in the moment, in the fiery passion of the affair, that I failed to see what was right in front of me, the danger. I was walking a tightrope, convinced that I could keep my balance, but I never once stopped to consider that one misstep could send me crashing down. I thought Michael, my husband, was completely oblivious to everything. He had always been so consumed by his work, so focused on his business trips, that I assumed he didn't have time or energy to notice the changes in me. How I began to wear certain clothes more often, how I would smile more than usual, or how I always seemed to have an excuse to go to the kitchen when David was there. To me, these were just small things, nothing that would raise any suspicion. But I was wrong. I had no idea that while I was indulging in my secret affair, Michael was watching. It wasn't just the occasional glance or the subtle signs I thought he was missing. No, Michael had been far more aware than I ever gave him credit for. He had seen the changes in me, the way I'd look at David a little too long, the way I'd act a little too carelessly. But it wasn't just observation that had tipped him off. Michael, the man I thought was too busy to notice, had taken precautions I never imagined. He had been watching me all along. And I had been too blind to see it. I didn't know that he had installed secret cameras around the house. One evening, I was lying in bed, stretching lazily after yet another evening of indulgence, when I heard the front door open. Michael was home. I quickly composed myself, smoothing my nightgown and brushing my hair with my fingers. But as soon as he stepped into the room, I knew something was wrong. He looked different, distant, cold. His usual warm smile was gone, replaced with something unreadable. My stomach tightened. A tiny alarm bell rang in my head, but I ignored it. I had gotten too comfortable, too confident in my deception. "How was your trip?" I asked, forcing a smile, trying to sound normal. He didn't answer immediately. He just stood there, his jaw clenched, his hands gripping his phone so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Then, slowly, deliberately, he unlocked his phone, scrolled for a moment, and turned the screen towards me. I barely had time to register what I was looking at before the realization hit me like a freight train. It was me. Me and David. Together. On camera. My blood turned to ice. My hands went numb. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it was about to burst. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. There was nothing to say. I had been caught. I couldn't breathe. My heart pounded in my chest. Michael's jaw was clenched so tightly I thought he might break a tooth. His hands trembled as he held the phone, his knuckles turning white. His entire body was rigid, like a man barely holding himself together. "How could you, Evelyn?" His voice was thick with pain, laced with a fury I had never heard before. It wasn't just anger, it was betrayal, heartbreak, disbelief. I stammered, my throat dry, my lips trembling. I had rehearsed 100 excuses in my mind, but now, under his burning gaze, none of them would come out. "How long?" His voice was sharp, slicing through the silence like a blade. I swallowed hard. I couldn't lie. The truth was staring back at him from the screen in his hands. "A few months," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Michael let out a bitter, hollow laugh, shaking his head. "A few months." His eyes flashed with rage. "My wife sleeping with our house help. You betrayed me, Evelyn. In our home. In our bed." I flinched at his words. The disgust in his voice felt like acid on my skin. Tears streamed down my face, but I knew no amount of crying could erase what I had done. "I'm so sorry, Michael," I choked. "It was a mistake." "A mistake." His voice rose, filled with raw emotion. He took a step closer, his chest rising and falling with deep, angry breaths. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is burning dinner. This," he held up the phone, shaking it, "this is not a mistake, Evelyn. This was a choice. Over and over again, you chose him." I sobbed, clutching my chest as if that could stop my heart from breaking. "I do love you, Michael," I cried. "Please, forgive me." But I saw it in his eyes. The damage was done. Some things could never be undone. Michael didn't say anything for a long time. He just looked at me, shaking his head. Then, he turned and walked away. That night, he slept in the guest room. The next morning, he packed a bag and left. I tried calling him, texting him, begging for another chance. But he ignored me. "David." He disappeared. I fired him the next day, unable to even look at him. I had lost everything. The price of betrayal. Weeks turned into months. The house felt empty, lifeless. Michael refused to come home. At first, I told myself he just needed time, that maybe, somehow, he would find it in his heart to forgive me. But deep down, I knew better. The silence was unbearable. His absence was louder than any argument we had ever had. I went to bed alone, woke up alone, ate meals in an empty house that once felt warm and full of love. Even David was gone. Michael had fired him immediately. I didn't even know where he went, and I didn't care. None of it had been worth this. Then, one day, a knock at the door shattered the quiet. I opened it to find a courier standing there, expressionless, holding a large envelope. "Mrs. Evelyn?" he asked. I nodded slowly, my stomach twisting into a knot. He handed me the envelope and walked away without another word. My hands trembled as I tore it open, my breath catching in my throat as I read the words printed on the top page. "Divorce petition." I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. My knees buckled, and before I knew it, I was on the floor, clutching the papers as sobs racked my body. It was real. This was real. The man who had once promised to love me forever had officially given up on me. I had destroyed my marriage, my home, my life. All for a moment of pleasure. A moment that had cost me everything. And the worst part? I had no one to blame but myself. Looking back, I saw my mistakes clearly, each one like a crack in the foundation of my life, slowly spreading until everything collapsed. I had been selfish, chasing a fleeting thrill without thinking of the consequences. I had been careless, believing I could play with fire and not get burned. I had been reckless, risking everything for a temptation that was never worth it. If I could turn back time, I would. I would stop myself before I let desire cloud my judgment. I would choose loyalty over lust, love over excitement, wisdom over foolishness. But life doesn't work that way. There are no second chances for some mistakes. So here I am, alone, sitting in the ruins of the life I once had, haunted by the choices I made. Regret is a heavy burden, and I carry it every single day. Because some mistakes can never be undone.